So if you want to create a culture which would be more forgiving, it would have to pay much more attention to the taken for granted positivity. So if somebody does their work well for 10 days, makes a mistake on the 11th, you don't wipe out the 10 days if you want to see things clearly. If somebody makes a mistake on every day, find them another job. But we magnify mistakes and failure, and we miss, because of the brain, all the good that people do, all the ways that they show up, and all the ways they contribute to business.
Hello, and welcome to the Mind Your Leadership podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Frederic Luskin, a well-known expert in the field of forgiveness, wellness, and positive psychology. Fred teaches at Stanford School of Business and is the director of Stanford Forgiveness Projects. He is also the author of best-selling books like Forgive for Good and Stress-Free for Good. Fred taught thousands of people how to manage stress, boost emotional intelligence, and lead with more empathy and understanding. Today, we're going to learn from his wealth of experience and discover how these practices can help us lead more consciously. So, Fred, I'm excited to be here with you.
Hey, thank you for inviting me.
And I like to start with a question before we dive into your work. I'd love to know what's something you're passionate about outside of the professional life that might surprise people. And you also.
You know, my interest in, I think you advertise as some mindful opening that you're interested in. I mean, I grew up as a hippie. I've had that interest in what makes a good life, like how do you live successfully, what are deep and real values. I've pondered those and struggled at times and been motivated by them my whole life. I know my whole life, ever since high school. I started meditating in college and started practicing yoga in high school. So that's just a deep underlying theme of a long period of time. That would be the best answer that I could give you, that what are we doing here and what can we do here to have a meaningful life?
So you can share with us what initially inspired you to focus specifically on forgiveness, and now you came to establish the Stanford Forgiveness Project? Because you took a really specific niche in all this conscious world and you said, okay, I'm putting my effort on a really special thing, on forgiveness.
That was not a conscious intention. Two factors. One, I wanted to do a dissertation study somewhere that looked at the intersection between science and spirituality. Like, this was in the 90s. Those two fields were really held far apart. And it didn't make any sense to me that why couldn't you use science to corroborate some of the tenets of religion and spiritual practice? So I wanted to do that. The only field at that point that had any research in it was forgiveness, which had maybe 3 studies. There was nothing on compassion. There was nothing on love. There was a small handful on meditation. But as a doctoral student, you could not invent a field. So that didn't leave me a lot of wiggle room. Forgiveness was compelling because I had found it so difficult to do. So I had spent a couple of years right before that really struggling with anger and bitterness over something that a close person to me had done. And it was really a painful, difficult, and I made my wife's life miserable. And I was just a crappy person. And so I figured that, well, two things. One, if I was so troubled by it, obviously it was a meaningful thing, even for educated people who were already therapists. And I figured something out, how to deal with it. And so I could use what I figured and try to create an intervention that would help people.
That's amazing. You know, it's interesting how the universe works because we were supposed to meet like a few months ago. And at the end of the day, we met today. And I'm really in a deep process of increasing my awareness. You know, it doesn't finish. And in the last few days, I acknowledged that I really have a tough time to forgive. I wasn't aware of it. So it amazed me to see how I am attached to it. And actually, I'm creating suffer for myself. The fact that I don't forgive others, I pay the price. It's unbelievable.
So a
So,
little shocking when any of this stuff, when you see yourself more clearly. You know, you can practice mindfulness, you can practice meditation, you can have all sorts of good intentions, but they can also obscure some of your weaknesses if you're not careful. Like you can call yourself, well, I'm a good spiritual person or whatever. That doesn't hide the fact that we're all missing a lot of abilities and struggle in many ways to cope with life. And my way of seeing now that I'm older, some of the deepest mindfulness is just being aware of our own flaws and our own protections and the ways we disguise what we're doing in the world. That takes a lot of courage.
why do you think it's so hard for us to forgive?
Well, part of it is what you just said. It's hard to be honest. And
Right.
so if you were honest, you'd recognize that you have a tendency to get angry, which takes some of the fault away from whatever it was that hurt you. Two, you'd recognize that you hold on to wounds more deeply than you hold on to beauty and goodness. So you'd become aware of that in yourself. You'd become aware that you tend to lack compassion. So you see other people's behavior sometimes as worse than it is, and you give them really harsh motivation. And you may come to see that nobody taught you how, but you'd be more in a state of like open curiosity rather than anger or bitterness, that you cannot know stuff is one thing or recognize our struggles without having to be unforgiving. You can just be stuck.
Exactly. And I think we also we're attached to this unforgiveness because I think maybe it also serves us, right? Because I don't need to take responsibility for my actions, and I throw it on the other person and he's guilty, he's making me feel like this and I like kind of in a loop, but I create suffer by holding onto it, right? What do you think?
You know, the whole question of how much control we have is a deep and challenging question. So most of the stuff that we're trying to forgive, nobody meant to hurt us. Well, we didn't intend to screw up. Most people who hurt us do it out of selfishness, ignorance, a lack of concern for us, but very rarely do they deliberately try to harm us. So we don't have influence on many of those things. Secondly, even with ourselves, what we see is how patterned our responses are. You know, we have the same old thoughts and we do the same old things and we respond in the same old ways. So much of like what makes this difficult is our unconscious patterning and our repetitive nature of things And changing that is really hard. It takes a lot of will and attention. And so it's easier to just do the same old stuff or blame somebody else for why our life doesn't work. Those are simpler ways out until we figure out that those aren't helping us.
So true. You created a model for forgiveness, right? How to forgive?
Well, you forgive to save yourself. It's like a rescue operation, you know? It's like when we're unforgiving, we're stuck. And we're stuck somewhere, unfinished business from the past. So a piece of our energy and attention is not available to us now. It limits us and it causes us to be more repetitive, like more patterns. And those are present centered minimizers of our happiness.
Mhm.
You're just less happy that way. You're not exactly able to see the sunset quite as deeply or appreciate your partner or love as fully. Those are limitations, and some people are lucky enough they get frustrated with their limitations. So they say, "Ooh, okay, I don't want to be bound by 2012. I want to be in 2024 because that's where my life is." That's usually the motivation that drives people to think of forgiveness.
Amazing. It's actually resonate with me because I felt stuck in something and I really deep dive to this specific thing. And then I understood that I'm attaching to my anger. I'm not forgiving someone. And it actually comes back to me because it's really create stuckness in my life. It's unbelievable how it starts within ourselves, right? So the ability to reflect upon ourselves and to really be honest and to accept to see things that we don't actually want to see, right? What do you think about it?
But you're the one practicing anger or unforgiveness. Whatever happened is gone, and all we have left are our responses. And you know this. So when you're practicing anger or you're practicing self pity, the link that keeps you stuck is blame. It's their fault that right now I'm not happy enough, so I need to be angry or self pity. It's their fault, not mine. And as long as it's their fault, I don't have to change. But once it becomes an opportunity for me to rescue myself, then I see the blame as an obstacle, not a band aid. And once you see that as an obstacle and being mindful is really good for that. Like, oh, look at me. I'm putting this on. I'm putting on the costume of it's their fault. It's not my fault. Or what I did 12 years ago is the driver for now. Well, that's ridiculous because right now I'm blaming. And as long as I'm blaming, I'm stuck in a very vulnerable way with a bad experience. I don't need that.
It's so true, and it's so, I think, difficult to handle it because, in the day-to-day routine and stress, and especially in companies and in the workplace, people are really stressed out. How do you offer leaders and executives to deal with this forgiveness, to create cultures that based more on forgiveness and empathy?
I mean, if you're running a business, you don't want lots of pissed off people in your business. It will make them less effective. They will make worse decisions. And it will drain the energy of the company from coalescing around its business goals. You're going to have normal disharmony anywhere people get together. I mean, people don't always get along, it's not easy. So there's always discord. An executive would be well advised to practice and show forgiveness. So they model it for their company. Somebody makes a mistake. You don't want to hold on to that for the next 9 years. Somebody screws up, you screw up. You need to move past that to be into the present so an executive can model it. He can also coach people, like, hey, you're working with people. Shit's gonna happen. You don't want to hold on to it. You don't want to sink our collective ship by all this stuff that happened in the past. It's a good freeing mechanism for most businesses.
Yeah, comes to my mind, there's a practice they say, let's talk about our failures. Let's have a meeting and like it's called the fuck up night. Let's talk about where we didn't succeed and where we failed and learn from it instead of hanging to this failure. Let's see how we are going forward. So actually what you're saying as leaders and executives, we need to create space for also for failures and not to be angry about it, but to create this learning environment to say, okay, we didn't succeed as we wanted. Let's see what we got out of it and maybe what we can learn going forward, but letting go of the failure, right? What do you think?
Well, there's also a company culture of what kind of accountability do people have for mistakes or failures. So that goes along with kind of a self-forgiveness. So if you screw up or like you really make an error, it's really important to feel genuine remorse and not to hide or disguise it or blame someone else. Like if you want a forgiving environment, people also have to own what they did. Like,
Right.
I screwed up. I thought it was X. It turned out to be Y. I operated on the premise of X. Y was the right one. I screwed up. I'm sorry. What can I do to make it right? Those three qualities of remorse, regret, no, I mean, remorse, apology, and amends. That's how we earn self-forgiveness. That's how we say, hey, I did my piece to repair. I'm done. But that's also how really functional teams work. People can own their errors. They can legitimately feel bad about it. They can apologize for it. They can try to make it right. And then they can let it go. They don't have to hold on to this image of somebody who screwed up.
But in order to create this environment, I think you really need to feel safe, to bring yourself fully and to be vulnerable and to be authentic and say, I failed. I'm taking responsibility, because if it's a culture that shows only a fake personality and everybody plays a fake identity, so it's really hard to be so authentic and to put yourself out there because you won't be safe, so you won't do it. So it goes
Well,
together.
but that requires some organizational safety where failure or mistakes are not seen as crimes. I mean, mistakes and failures are not the same as stealing or, like criminal activity. They're normal human experiences. And a culture that has a little more tolerance for normal human experience, which includes failure and mistakes, will probably facilitate more risk taking and more adaptive ways of dealing with failure rather than buck passing and blame. But it's this understanding, like you asked me a little while ago, some of the ways we deceive ourselves. And one of the major ways we deceive ourselves is focusing on what's wrong rather than focusing on both what's wrong and what's right. I mean, you know enough. It's the negativity bias is a human limitation. We over examine mistakes and under-examine success. So if you want to create a culture which would be more forgiving, it would have to pay much more attention to the taken for granted positivity. So if somebody does their work well for 10 days, makes a mistake on the 11th, you don't wipe out the 10 days if you want to see things clearly. If somebody makes a mistake on every day, find them another job. But we magnify mistakes and failure, and we miss, because of the brain, all the good that people do, all the ways that they show up, and all the ways they contribute to business. If those were seen, if people knew they were being seen for what they contribute, not just what they don't contribute, it would create a much more realistic perspective at work.
It's amazing how it's true and how it's difficult for people to see, because we take things for granted, right? Like, okay, you did your job, you should have done your job, but
Exactly.
how much does it cost you to say good work for your employee? Wow, I'm really happy with your job, good job, or whatever. But it creates so much impact, and we don't understand it, right? We only see what's bad, but instead of putting the effort and looking at what's good, and then it will, as you say, it will nourish, right? It's unbelievable.
And that helps everyone become more forgiving because it's not taken so out of context.
The bucket is full, right? It would give energy and positivity, and they feel like being seen. So if I make a mistake once in a while, it's okay, I can handle it. But if I always it, right?
And it's going to happen. It's going to happen anyway. You're going to make mistakes. And the problem is also when you judge people harshly, you lose some of the capacity inside to see the good. Like often people who are harsh and judgmental, they don't even see the good. And that's one of the dangers in a poorly run business is they don't see the efforts and the successes that people bring. They literally don't see them because of their anxiety and stress.
But usually, people that are criticizing others, it starts because they're criticizing themselves. They don't accept themselves, right? They really don't.
I'm not sure that's true.
Why not?
There are a lot of people out there who are incredibly harsh to others and let themselves off the hook all the time.
Yeah, you think?
You meet a lot of people like that who are very critical, but about themselves, they make excuses for everything, or they have a weird form of self-acceptance. There are other people who are very good-hearted and kindly outside, but very hard on themselves. I'm not convinced that it's one quality. There was a book and a thesis decades ago, transactional analysis. And one of the books was I'm okay, you're okay. But it mentioned, and it came from some of Alfred Adler's work, about we make a basic decision that when we're young, either I'm okay and you're okay, or I'm not okay and you're not okay. But a lot of people come up with I'm okay, but you're not okay. And those people can be very difficult because they can't take feedback, but they can give it. And they're unforgiving outwardly, but they just go along their lives and do what they want. Anyway, I'm not convinced that that nostrum, that it always revolves first around the self, is as true.
That's really interesting, because there's other assumption that people, it's easier for them to forgive others but not forgive themselves. That they're really harsh on themselves, but it's easier to forgive others. So it's interesting a paradigm. I don't know also what's right, because I always thought that It's like I can't love anybody more than I love myself. That you agree with me? That it starts with ourselves? And the judgment, it's the contrary to love, no? To acceptance and love. So as much as I love myself and accept myself, I will be able to accept and love others. But if I'm judgmental toward myself and not accepting myself, I won't be able to accept others. You don't think it goes together?
With some people, it does. I've met people who, you know, they don't treat themselves that well, but they love their kids. I've met other people who treat themselves really well and don't treat their kids well.
Okay.
I get the hope that we can reduce it to that kind of formula. And there are a large number of people who have a I'm not okay, you're not okay framing, or an I'm okay and you're okay framing. I just don't think that covers the whole domain. That's all I'm pushing back on.
So you say there's diversity between people, the way they accept themselves and act out others.
Yeah. And the self forgiveness piece, if we're honest, most of us are too self forgiving.
Really? Why do you think?
Well, because we don't really want to see how we behave. So when we make mistakes or we hurt people, we let ourselves off the hook or we lie about it rather than looking deeply at ourselves and seeing, wow, look what I did. I better change or open to something new. Again, getting back to business, if you're asking me,
Mhm.
creating a climate where people are forgiving of themselves and forgiving of others will reduce stress and create a lot of harmony. And it's the harmony that is important.
That's true. You know, if people listen and want to understand in baby steps. Okay, I really want it. I really want to create a forgiving culture and compassion and love. What will you offer them to do? Baby steps in order to start moving toward this kind of culture.
Well, I'm going to say the easiest baby step is to practice forgiveness with people you care for. So if you have a partner and you have a kid, you have a parent, and those relationships really matter, forgive them. Like, and it doesn't mean never notice what they do wrong. What it means is acknowledge what they do wrong and process it from your heart, knowing that the relationship is more important than the offense. So if you have a husband or a wife, you're married an imperfect person who makes mistakes. You practice forgiving their mistakes by noticing how much they bring to you. You cultivate some gratitude. You notice your own failures and flaws. And so you create some humility. Those are the two qualities that are so deeply important: gratitude for the goodness and some humility for the imperfections that we bring also.
I think and another thing that is important in this process is also acknowledging the sadness, the anger that we feel, giving it space, right? Not
Absolutely.
ignoring it, but giving it space, and at the same time, seeing also the person as a human and with its flaws, holding this paradoxical space. And then we can go through this emotion and enable it to transform, right? And then we really let go of the anger and we can really forgive. Because if it's only stay right in the mind, we won't really forgive.
Exactly. And in many businesses, people use suppression and denial and minimization, suppression, pushing it down, denial, I don't feel this way, minimization, yeah, they didn't really mean it, whatever. Those don't help. What is helpful is to own your experience, validate it, maybe share it with a person or two, and then let it go. That's emotional health.
And I think really, especially nowadays in this technology-wise environment, in the AI development, I think this is the crucial thing that we need to be connected to our emotional abilities, right? Because in our heart is the compassion, empathy, passion, creativity, and these traits we need to embrace nowadays and nourish. And if we ignore and deny, so we won't be connected to the stream of life, right? So we really need to do the work and forgive deeply and let go of some emotions and enable them to transform, because at the end of the day, emotion is energy in motion. So we really need to enable it to move, right? Otherwise, it will be stuck in our body, circling back to the beginning of our conversation, right?
We know when we have that kind of heavy malaise inside of us. People come into work and they just know the relationships are weird and there's a lot of drama that's not being expressed and people have grudges. You can feel it. It gummies up your system. Forgiveness, again, as I probably started, is for us. It frees us from maybe not that skillful a response to what happened. And you let it go because mostly we want to free ourselves from this gummying up so we can appreciate the beauty in our own life. That's why we do this.
Amazing. Fred, before we need to wrap up, is there anything that I didn't ask you and that you want to share with our listeners?
The two things that I add when people ask me that question is there's enough data now that you could say that forgiveness practiced is good for one's physical, emotional, and relationship well-being. There's data for that. And the second is you can teach yourself to do it. It's not some weird, esoteric, religious thing. It's a well-practiced life skill that you can learn. And people like me at universities go around teaching people. Those are usually the quotas that I add.
That's great. But I want another tool. How can I teach myself to forgive?
The easiest thing is to either, when you're upset or feeling that thing, either remember someone you love and hold it in your heart, or go to the window, open your arms up and go, wow, sunshine, you are a good deal. Thank you. And dissipate the negativity. Just let the negativity at that moment go. That's a very valuable practice so you don't keep on building it up.
It's amazing. It's also like the practice that they say every morning, say it with good thing in front
Oh,
of the
no
mirror, right?
question. No question.
Like
No
put your
question.
attention on the positive instead of the negatives.
You learn to hold them both. We
Yeah.
overdo the negative.
Fred, it was really an exciting and profound conversation. Thank you very much for your wisdom and experience.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Hope you enjoyed the conversation. You're invited to subscribe to our podcast in order to know when we upload a new episode, and follow us on social media. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take care and bye-bye.